Welcome to the Universal Joint Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host Dustin Fuhs and I are recording this podcast on Monday, February 17th. I apologize for the slight Crypt Keeper impression going on here, folks, but and I apologize. It's been more than a month since our last podcast, which we posted back on January 22nd. But that's not Dustin's fault, folks. In fact, you've been paying attention to his podcast, We Like Theme Parks. He's been going great guns with that one. They've been posting new shows every week like clockwork since the first of the year. So we're not here. Go check those out.
Yeah, we've actually been doing that for, I think this morning we put out episode 42. And it's one of those things that you don't realize until you get after, 30 or so, and you're like, okay, now what? But there's always more news, always. So it's been a blast. But yeah, I've been missing you. I gotta admit, it's been a little bit of time, and I'm like, but I want to talk to Jim. So that's where this is. I'm very excited to be able to catch up with all the Universal news.
Okay, well, as for that slight pause, folks, again, you're hearing the reason. That's a couple of weeks back, I caught that cold that's going around, the one that's supposed to take 21 days to completely get out of your system. And as you can tell from my voice, we're about a week away from that. But
yep, day 14.
Yeah. So, but we're going to try to still knock out a show here. So, again, apologize for the lengthy hiatus. But and in fact, to be honest, immediately pivoting to our first news item, I feel like a whiny baby man for bringing up my throat issues when you think about what's going on with the coronavirus. All right. So, as of today, there have been over 71,000 confirmed cases, most of those in mainland China, 1,775 confirmed deaths. And at one point, China had 50 million of its citizens in more than a dozen cities locked down and quarantined in an effort to bring COVID-19. By the way, that's how the World Health Organization 6 days ago announced that they'd like us to start talking about this. It's COVID-19 is the official designation. But anyway, they've been trying to bring it under control. And what's kind of interesting is that given everything that's at stake here, I mean, think about it, China's position on the world stage, the Chinese people's trust in their government, not to mention this country's overall impact on the global economy. China's kind of desperate to put the best possible face, forward in this still evolving situation, which Dustin brings us to yesterday's kind of weird press release. Okay, now just to sort of set this up. All right, so think about this. You remember the entertainment press. And, Shanghai Disneyland, out of an abundance of caution and to support the efforts to suppress coronavirus, it shuts down back in January 25th. And Hong Kong Disneyland, the very next day, it closes. And what Disney, by the way, is telling the investment community, it's entirely possible that its two China theme parks will not be able to safely reopen for 2 months.
Oh, wow. And,
as they explain it, that could mean a $175 million hit to the company's bottom line. But, remember, there's also Universal Studios Beijing. That project broke ground back in October of 2016. It's a $6.5 billion resort theme park complex built on 130 acres of land. But, as you and I have talked about, Dustin, the opening date of this park is slid from 2019 to 2020 to now it's supposed to open in May of 2021. But at the same time, when you think about it, when so many workers are being forced by government edict to stay home until this national health crisis passes, people like you and I, Dustin, cover the themed entertainment industry, just began to inquire about, whether this latest setback was going to mean that Universal Studios Beijing was going to have its opening pushed back yet again. And now, again, to explain, this project is largely funded by the Beijing Shuhao Cultural Tourism Investment Group. Okay, they put up the bulk of the $6.5 billion to build this place. And Comcast, NBC Universal, they provided the expertise, more to the point, the IP that this theme park and resort could be built around, as well as a small chunk of the funding. So long story short, It's the Beijing Shuhan Cultural Tourism Investment Group that has assumed the bulk of the risk here. So when people began asking about whether or not, what's going on with Universal Studios Beijing, is it going to make its May 2021 opening? They issued a press release where it's like, hey, construction of the theme park is supposed to be completed by the end of 2020. The attraction and ride equipment is right now being installed, and buildings which house the Universal Studios Grand Hotel, the new resort, and the Universal City Walk Beijing have already been capped. And that when this theme park opens, thanks to the partnership with Alibaba, Universal Studios Beijing will feature technological innovations such as facial recognition admissions and app-based food ordering. And the principal goal of the coming year, once, of course, the quarantine and travel bans are lifted, is to recruit and train the 14,000 employees necessary to properly staff this theme park and resort, which is still on schedule to open in May of 2021. So long story short, nothing to see here. Move along. And if anything,
Wow.
What was particularly interesting is they actually then pointed people to the story that ran in today's New York Times about how there are tourist destinations in Europe because the Chinese people aren't traveling now because of the travel bans that are suffering tremendously. They don't have the bodies to operate those places. It's like, so, as far as let me get the name right again here, the Beijing Shuhan Cultural Tourism Investment Group, as far as they're concerned, it's like, why aren't you guys reporting on that story? Why are you talking about whether our theme park is going to open on time? So
yeah, it's very interesting looking at these types of things because, Universal didn't choose to have this epidemic, thrust upon them, and they're working around it, but there's only so much that as a cultural tourism investment group can put together. I see this throughout Toronto because we had to deal with SARS a number of years ago, and during that time period everything just shut down. It wasn't misinformation. It was just people were taking precautions that meant that instead of doing a vacation around the world and to see all these amazing sites, they did staycations. And it made sense. But now what we're seeing is an epidemic that is being translated into, amazing stories out there in the major news organizations, things like that, the 10-day hospital that was built from, the ground up just to take control of, the COVID-19. And yes, we're talking about a Universal theme park, which is, we tend to escape reality when something like this is going on. But I got to admire their, just putting out a press release saying that we're still on schedule and don't worry, we're still going to get these 14,000 employees to properly staff this theme park. But I got to, put a little bit of caution out there where, what's the last part of any theme park? Well, it's all about the training and the development. That's a lot of hands-on work. And when we're talking about hands-on, you're going to be around people. You're going to be, doing soft opens. You're going to be dealing with a lot of things. So that is something that came to my mind when I saw this story. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's going to be a big thing coming to that area.
Well, and it's also worth noting here, and again, I apologize that, we're talking about, this is literally a life and death issue here, and we're talking about how this impacts theme parks. But if we're being completely blunt here, that at least as far as Hong Kong Disneyland is concerned, which was having depressed attendance because of the rioting in the streets in Hong Kong because of Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill that was under consideration by the Hong Kong government. In a weird sort of way, they're like, oh, cool, we get to close our park, and then all that stuff goes away, and then we reopen it. This is the weirder aspect of the story. Anyway,
yeah.
I mentioned in passing the whole Alibaba facial recognition thing, and I bring that up because you came across this amazing new patent that Universal Parks and Resorts has just managed to register. Do you want to talk a little bit about this smart virtual queue thing?
Sure. I gotta give a huge, assist for this from LinkedIn. Go figure. So it looks like there is an industrial engineer at Universal Orlando Resort that posted on LinkedIn sharing that after 3 years of work, the systems and methods for a smart virtual queue patent was officially filed. Incredible stuff. It actually, the post that this engineer Austin Kelly posted had like a photo of the letter that they got from Mark Woodbury, and amazing stuff. I got to share that with Universal Creative, they are always pushing the bounds and trying to think outside the box. And the fact that these guys have been working on a patent for 3 years just shows how incredible this is.
Oh, no doubt.
Now the actual patent itself is. It's very interesting when you look at how many steps go into it. Basically, the idea is that there is a fast pass system that they're utilizing for a virtual queue. When you go to a theme park, there are things that you can be doing within the park that will continuously update your queue. I am very interested to see how this is going to run. The figure that they put out there, the actual design, has so many moving parts, but I love it. As a theme park fan, I love it.
Well, it's interesting that this bubbled up today because, of course, over the past week or so, we had some additional information show up about Universal Classic Monsters Land, which is now the third land that we've had confirmed for Epic Universe, the fourth park that Universal is building in Orlando. And before we continue here, I want to be sure that we credit Alicia Stella. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, over at her absolutely excellent Orlando Park Stop website. Now, first of all, Alicia broke the story initially back in February of last year. She was the one who got a hold of that document that, that first made us all aware that Universal Classic Monsters Land was in the works for, the fourth park. And to give her credit, almost a year to that day, she's back with more hyper-detailed information about this new land for Epic Universe Land, that she did her due diligence, she did her request for the permits for the land, and my God, if you go to her site right now, she's got the lay of the land, lots of great detail about possible location of ride shows and attractions, shops, and the like. But again, it's important to stress here that Epic Universe is not scheduled to open till 2023. So I guess the big question here, Dustin, is could this new virtual queue system, the one that, the patent, be incorporated to Universal's fourth theme park? And my problem is that I can't help but think back to 1999. Which is when, in fact, to be specific, July of 1999, that was when FastPass was first tested at Disneyland Park. Yes. And everybody was like, oh, this amazing system. And it's like, oh, my God, I don't have to stand in a line to get in a ride. I can book a reservation in advance. And it was like, this will be cool. That, oh, my God, you guys are going to put this into Disney's California Adventure, right? And it's like, no, we're not. Or at least we're not. We broke ground for, Disney's California Adventure back in 1997. We didn't build this park to be the first one to have FastPass automatically considered. And in fact, that was, you may remember the early stories of FastPass when they were sending people up the exits, and that there were actual fist fights from people who were standing in line who didn't understand, why are you going to the front? And this is the hard reality that, for example, like when FastPass Plus began testing at Walt Disney World in May of 2012, and Disney decided, okay, so it does work. The fact that every door of every hotel room on Disney World property had to be swapped out to accommodate magic bands. Likewise, all of the queue entry points, not to mention every touch point purchase opportunity. I mean, it took years and millions upon millions of dollars.
It does look like this is what this patent is going to do, though, because what they're bringing together is a virtual queue system, which is one wearable device, which comprising of a near field communicator, a medium range communicator, and a long range communicator, in addition to a display.
Okay.
So there is a lot. What I would do if you are a theme park fan, and I know that everyone who's listening to this is, head over, just Google the patent. So it's a virtual queue system and method, and just read. It's brilliant. Some of the technologies that have been utilized, in addition to theme park methodology, that you can only dream about. Because they're thinking long term, and they're thinking about how to truly have an interactive experience that, at the end of the day, will impact each and every single person that goes into a theme park. Now, granted, it does look very similar to something like a Magic Band because it's wearable technology. But let's be honest, wearable technologies have been taken to a whole new level. When you start looking at within the Disney parks, you've got, when you go onto an on-ride or an attraction that has an on-ride photo, you don't have to tap your Magic Band anymore. It's automatically put into your account. We're now looking at that next stage.
Okay.
And I think the fact that this came out, awesome stuff. And with this connected with what Alicia is putting out there, which I don't know if Universal is enjoying the fact that the Patent Office and the Freedom of Information Acts are being as thoroughly disclosed, but I'm impressed with it.
Okay, now just a word of caution here that,
Sure.
Again, if you look at the diagram that goes with this suggests slide, as in water slide, and more to the point, that this references that they applied for a patent, which they have received after 3 years. If you're kind of working the math here, I wonder how much of this is
Volcano Bay.
Tapu based.
Yeah.
Also, look, there are people at Walt Disney World today who, when you bring up the cost of, again, we talked about replacing doors and touch points and, queue entries and that sort of thing. And they said, don't care. We made all the money back on turkey legs, but it's fascinating to me that Magic Bands and FastPass Plus, again, debuted at Walt Disney World in 2012. We are now 8 years later, and we are not seeing this technology at Disneyland. In fact, if anything, think about it, the boarding groups technology that debuted with the opening day of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge last May or thereabouts. And if you talk with folks at Disneyland, they will flat out tell you, it's like, well, there's a reason. We're not a destination resort. We are the world's most famous regional theme park. Our mix of tourists to locals is most a perfect inversion of Disneyland. And, we'd have to ask everybody who's potentially coming to Disneyland to buy a Magic Band or maintain a Magic Band.
And basically change the way that they've gone to Disneyland.
Forever. And, so that's one of the reasons why they actually have leaned into a telephone-based system. In fact, if you talk with the folks at Disneyland, they've been eyeballing, the opening of Rise of Resistance at that park as, it's just like, man, we wanted this to really go smoother than this because we were kind of hoping this was the future of Disneyland. That, instead of a Magic Band, you do everything through your phone. Because face it, everybody has a phone. Whereas not everybody has a Magic Band. And so, anyway, to circle back to Universal here, the other thing that we need to remind people about when it comes to Epic Universe is, remember, this is supposed to be the first Universal park that's made up primarily of a highly themed environment. So again,
yes.
If you're in Universal Classic Monsterland, you're in Transylvania. If you're, you go to How to Train Your Dragon Land, you're on the island of Berk. Super Nintendo Land, you're inside a game. But at the same time, remember, there was a reason that they went after this land right next to the convention center. And the whole notion was that, in addition to having this amazing immersive land park, they were also going to be able to, in effect, close off each of these lands so that they could be then, after hours, sold as a special convention perk to any large group that was coming down. So, the notion...
You actually just brought up an amazing detail, and I don't want to go too far past it. You brought up Super Nintendo Land.
Right.
During the videos and the introduction to Super Nintendo World and everything that Universal and and Nintendo put together, one of the things that they showed was jumping up and hitting a box and getting a coin. Do you think that this technology with a magic band style on your wrist could actually help gameplay?
I've seen the video of the reporter jumping up and hitting the coin box, and it's forgive me, I'm looking at that and thinking, this is more of an interactive wand thing. This is is a retail opportunity rather than enhanced gameplay. But remember, getting back to the whole DCA, why didn't they put FastPass in? Again, remember, they're designing Epic Universe to accommodate after-hour crowds.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's going to also factor into this. But at the same time, there's going to be an education curve, and more to the point, the admissions material or whatever, they use for Epic Universe proves to be popular. Perhaps they'll walk that out to the other Universal parks. But remember, if you think about Walt Disney World right now, for example, the Magic Kingdom, when it comes to FastPass Plus, has no tiered attractions. Whereas, if you go to Epcot, if you go to...
the studios have Smuggler's Run, and I believe it's... is it Slinky Dog or is it Toy Story Mania?
The point I was trying to make is the other three parks do have, Tier 1, Tier 2.
Yes.
And it's entirely possible when Tron comes online that perhaps that'll be the first tiered attraction. Yeah. But again, it's just this whole notion of, think about it. If you're somebody going to Walt Disney World right now, you have to be familiar with the tiering of the Magic Bands. You have to understand that you need to have your phone out and be on Hollywood Boulevard before 8 o'clock in the morning to get your boarding group for, a Rise of the Resistance. And as a friend who worked at the resort pointed out, said, you don't understand. In 2021, we are inviting the entire world to come here for our 50th anniversary. And it says, we know from our own research, there are billions, literally billions of people who've never been to Walt Disney World who don't understand Magic Bands, who don't understand boarding groups. Think about it. You're going to be standing in line behind these folks during the 50th anniversary, as some poor cast member has to explain, no, you have to touch the Magic Band thing there, and then it will turn green, and put your finger there, and now we can go in the park.
And you know what those guests will say?
What?
Whoa.
Oh, well, there we go. And that brings us to something we'll be talking about in just a moment.
Every successful business evolves. And to keep up, you need a bank relationship that evolves too. When you collaborate with KeyBank, you don't get one-size-fits-all solutions. Our expansive team of experts across industry verticals wouldn't be here if you did. Always ready with bespoke solutions for your biggest challenges and opportunities. We know all businesses are different, and that's why we approach business differently. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
What if an appliance emergency didn't have to be? If your appliances suddenly decided they were done, don't stress. Best Buy has you covered with a wide variety of major appliances from trusted brands, in stock and available now. So you don't have to worry about laundry piling up, refilling the fridge, or that big dinner party you're hosting. Because Best Buy has the knowledge and expertise to get you the right appliance for your home. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
And as Dustin just teased there, how many of you have seen the new Universal Parks and Resorts ad, Let Yourself Woah? Now, which version have you seen, Dustin? Now, I know there's the North American English version with Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live. There's also Arturo Castro's version. He's been very popular comic on Comedy Central. And they've got him By the way, folks, if you want to see something genuinely entertaining, if you head over to YouTube, there's a wonderful behind-the-scenes ad. Sort of shows Kenan and Arturo sort of fumbling their way through doing this. Because, again, they're shooting at a live theme park. But just to double back to Kenan, what I love about this is that Kenan actually started off his career at Universal Studios Florida. He was a member of the cast of All That. Which, of course, the Kenan and Kel show was spun off from. And in fact, the Good Burger movie that came out of the sketch there.
Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Can I take your order? Yeah, classic stuff. This is real comedy.
Okay. But you were saying you came across an interview with Kenan about he himself is excited about this gig?
Yeah, over on the Universal Orlando blog, they did a sit-down interview with him. And, some of the stuff that went through was awesome. But when they asked him the question, like, tell me the experience about being part of the new Woah campaign, he's like, I got to tell you, it's been incredible. There's a lot of love here in Orlando, and it's been incredibly nostalgic for me because this is where I had my first job. We've been prepping 20 feet away from where I spent most of my teenage years. And I'm really excited to roll this out and see how people respond to the whole Woah of it all. And it's going to be fun. And I gotta say, with that type of thing, going back to the nostalgic and the idea of, he was there. It's not just some comedian, some actor that they hired to come in and explain what Universal's all about. That's where he spent most of his teenage years. It makes sense. But I think they got the tone of the advertisement correct, because there are experiences that you go through Universal and all you can do is sit back and be like, whoa.
Well, but it's interesting you bring that up. If I have to nitpick.
Sure.
Well, first of all, again, they cut the national ad so it highlights both Universal Orlando and Universal Hollywood. And I really feel for the people who, in Florida, when people show up and it's like, I want to get on the Jaws ride, which I just saw in the ad that ran nationally. And it's like, oh, you're about 10 years too late.
Oops.
On the other hand, I guess, again, it's fascinating to me, if you think about how much time and money Universal has spent on Harry Potter and sort of broadening the family appeal of the park. But at the same time, here they are basically selling themselves as a throw park, a place where you go, whoa. Whereas you think about it, the most recent national Disney ad for its theme parks, you have a dad who's sadly looking at his iPhone of footage of his daughter when she was a little girl meeting Cinderella at the Magic Kingdom for the first time. And in the background, his daughter is getting ready to go off to college. And literally the catchphrase for this commercial is, you want to take them to Disney World because they're only little for a little while. And, it's just sort of like, so again, here's Disney leaning into the nostalgia. And trust me, folks, out ahead of the 50th anniversary, you have not seen anything yet. They should send every home in North America a box of tissues. But on the other hand, Universal, if you take the 30,000-foot view, is actually making a conscious effort to distance at least one of its theme parks from that thrill-based reputation. In fact, case in point, did you see the news about how the Walking Dead walkthrough attraction at Universal Studios Hollywood? It opened on the upper lot back in July of 2016, but it's closing next month on March 4th.
It didn't even make it 4 years.
Yeah,
that's crazy for that park.
Well, I remember talking with John Murdy, the head of creative for that park. And at the time, they had done Walking Dead mazes for Halloween Horror Night 2 years prior, and they'd been hugely popular. And the show was almost white hot at that point. I think 2016 is the year that they split the series. They launched Beware the Walking Dead. So, on paper, it made sense. And John was talking about the fact that, in a weird sort of way, this allows us to have a Halloween Horror Night maze in the park year round. But the weird part of it is that they really didn't factor in how many families go to Universal Studios Hollywood. And the fact that, there were so many families that would stand outside of that attraction and go, nope, and go look for something else. So it just didn't do the business that they thought. And when you think about just around the corner from that, you have, in effect, your Illuminations Mini-Land with Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem, and Super Happy Funland, the little water park thing. And now just about to open The Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Brian on the West Coast, who, as I was typing up the show notes for today's show, was kind enough to share images. He was in the park today, and evidently the walls are down from the outside of the Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash show building. And man, Dustin, that structure looks like it's straight out of the movie. It looks like the real neighborhood.
It's like it looks like it's been there for such a long time.
Yeah, but now the big question is, okay, so if Walking Dead shuts down, and the interesting thing is that this means, by the way, that basically the folks who worked on Walking Dead are going to be retrained or have the opportunity to retrain for Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash. But now you have an interesting piece of real estate open in the upper lot, facing onto Universal Plaza.
Now, do you think that with the Walking Dead attraction closing, is that one of those E.T. extraterrestrial wrong place, wrong time mentalities? Because if it was down on the lower lot versus the upper lot, which, let's be honest, a lot of the families are, hang around the upper lot because there's a lot more to do. Do you think that if they put that down on the lower lot, that it probably would have bought it another year or two?
The irony with that is there's so much, the real estate down there is so valuable between use for actual production on NBC Universal Productions, coupled with the fact that, you actually have to block out space for real mazes for, the Halloween Horror Nights. So to take, that space up with a permanent show where, the whole notion of getting people to buy that extra ticket, to come back to the park in early September and all the way to early November now, that's an interesting question, though. I don't know.
I think you were right when you said white hot, because at that type of an experience, The Walking Dead was huge. And as IPs change within the marketplace, as we're seeing with Trolls and as we're seeing with The Secret Life of Pets and all these newer IPs coming in from DreamWorks, you're forgetting about some of the older ones like the Shreks and that kind of thing. But everything has its day. Wow. And I think that Universal Hollywood has a lot more of that real estate fluctuation because unlike Orlando, where they do have a mix of the blessing of size, but also the blessing that they're not a functional studio, they can play with a lot more time. So it was a very interesting when it came out, like, oh, it didn't last 4 years, but it's also looking at it like, yeah, kind of makes sense. They're still going to have the Halloween Horror Nights. They can't get away with that. It's just too much of a crowd pleaser. And honestly, we're dealing with a newer style of immersive experiences. Well, so and we'll see.
It's interesting you bring up Trolls because we've got the brand new Trolls movie coming out on April 17th, 2020. And as I understand it, dependent on how the box office for the sequel. Remember, the original Trolls came back out in theaters November 2016. So, again, less than 4 years ago now. There's a possibility that continuing the kid-friendly aspect of the upper lot, that perhaps something related to the Trolls would appear there. And certainly, Universal is definitely leaning into the Trolls lately. The Poppy Branch and Guy Diamond are serving as the hosts of Universal Studios Hollywood's next running Universal event, which will be held the weekend after this new DreamWorks animation movie opens in theaters. That opens on April 17th, and on Sunday, April 26th, that'll be when the 5K, the 10K, plus the Kids 1K will be run, and all people who participate will get a medal that features the characters from Trolls. And by the way, while we're talking about Universal running events while we were away, Universal Orlando had its running Universal event, the Epic Character 5K and 10K, which was held back on February 2nd. And I think, Dustin, you were talking about you were watching a GoPro of this, or?
Yeah, I like to make the joke that anyone who does these runs and they go with a GoPro, I'm getting my exercise just by watching them on YouTube. So... and especially when they're eating the voodoo donuts. So there are lots of things going on. But what I saw was that it was, they had weather issues. And let's be honest, in February, there are always days where you never know if it's going to be cold or rainy. And because it was a character run and it was built around, seeing all these characters, with rain, they really couldn't do that. And they couldn't take the chance to have character meet and greets set up and all the time and the expense that would take to set those up just to have it rained out. So what they ended up doing was they'd have a couple of roaming characters set up, but most of them were ducking underneath the end. So as soon as you finished, they'd have a spot in I believe at the back lot, it was right in behind, I'm trying to remember where it was. It was
Jimmy Fallon, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And they had that set up, and then they had just a lot more flexibility. Mm-hmm. And I was impressed with the style and all the ins and the outs that they did with running the race trail mm-hmm. and where they went. But there is a distinct difference as a theme park fan between the 5K and the 10K, because for the 10K, you got to go in behind, all the Harry Potter stuff. So that was a big draw for me to, think long term about running a 10K while someone GoPros it. But it was definitely a different experience. It looked like everyone had a blast. But the thing that really struck me was that Universal created a partnership with Voodoo Donuts mm-hmm. and actually had distinct donuts that were available for people who actually ran the race. So that was pretty cool.
I have to admit. By the way, you mentioned folks running behind Harry Potter. I wanted to give a shout out to our buddy BioReconstruct, who evidently took part in the Orlando Running Universal event early this month. And he sent me images of these two statues that I don't know how many of you remember the original arches when you entered, when there was just Universal Studios Florida. But that there were these two very distinct gargoyles that sort of flank the gate, and evidently they're still there. They're still out back, and they're so wonderfully detailed. I really kind of hope that when they're finally finishing up Universal Classic Monsterland for Epic Universe, and I don't know if it's Frankenstein's castle or Dracula's castle, whatever the giant, Alicia would know more about this than I would.
Oh, yeah.
But, that's, I hope they find a home for these things over there because they are so beautiful. Let's see, what else? We should.
Oh, Mardi Gras.
Yeah, Mardi Gras. A couple things. Want to let you folks know that starting just this past weekend, Valentine's Day, February 14th, the Free Agents Brass Band, which is a very, very special jazz band, by the way, folks. This is a group that's formed by a bunch of jazz musicians who were forced to leave New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, hit back in August of 2005 and effectively drowned the city. And they sort of formed this group as New Orleans expatriates, and to keep the music and the jazz and the second line dancing alive. So it's genuinely sweet that they're part of Universal's Mardi Gras celebration. If, on the other hand, you have no interest in, like Preservation Hall music, I want to point out that this coming Saturday, February 22nd, Kool and the Gang are going to be performing at Universal Studios Florida as part of the Mardi Gras celebration at the park.
That was a big get for Universal right there.
That was.
I love Kool and the Gang. I've always loved them, but every so often there will be a list of these festivals because they need to provide entertainment. Mm-hmm. And some of the groups that they can find, I'm just like, oh, that hits with the nostalgia. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And speaking of nostalgia, for those of us like myself who have been going to Universal since the first Central Florida theme park opened back in June of 1990, one of the big thrills of going to Universal was you could see actual TV shows or movies being made. In fact, that was the first time I saw Kenan Thompson. I attended a taping of all that. I think I may have actually seen he and Kel do a good burger sketch there. But
nice.
but anyway, I bring this up because coming up in, I want to say it's February 28th. They're going to, in fact, remember when we were talking about how when they opened the Today Show Cafe last year that, wouldn't it be cool if they sent Al Roker down to do a stand-up, inside the restaurant there, so.
Are you telling me before we get into the story that I should have bet on red instead of betting on black?
Well,
because I could have made so much money off this.
You could have, because it turns out on Friday, February 28th, they're not just doing a stand-up, they're doing the entire 4-hour broadcast of the Today Show out of the Today Show Cafe, which, given how tiny that space is, I don't understand this, but Al's supposed to be down, and the interesting thing is that Hoda and the bunch for the after show are also going to be there. So if you're a fan of how things are made, from a broadcast point of view, this would be a great day to be in the park.
And grab that Al's chicken, the Southern chicken biscuit slider platter, and just go win with expectations.
More to the point, I don't expect to be able to get a breakfast sandwich. I would be honestly surprised if the day before people will be able to get into that thing, between the
just location wise.
Yeah. So, and by the way, February 28th, also Universal's newest horror movie, The Invisible Man, arrives in theaters that same day. Again, want to warn folks, this is a Blumhouse production, so it's a contemporary take on the classic tale. Stars Elizabeth Moss. I think we mentioned on the last show, this looks like a hard R horror. So I don't anticipate we'll be seeing this version of The Invisible Man show up in Universal Classic Monsterland over at Epic Universe. But what about, did you see that story that broke just last week about the Monster Mash project that Universal picked up?
Oh yeah, it's confirmed that's going to Epic Universe, right? No, I'm joking. It's funny thinking about all these different Universal monsters and how many they have and what they could do with it.
Well,
so when that came out, I was just like,
Well, I guess for me, first of all, if you look at the article in the trades, it doesn't mention at all the Bobby Boris Pickett novelty song from '62, the Monster Mash song. It mentions that Matt Stwowski, who's a veterans video director, came up with the concept, and he's working on a script with Will Widger. And, just to sort of circle back to what we were talking about earlier, that if, the Walking Dead attraction didn't succeed with families who were visiting Universal Studios Hollywood. Obviously, a land that actually has the name Monsters in it is going to be something of a challenge to get small children to go into. So maybe this Monster Mash project is actually part of that. Maybe they're looking to put some more kid-friendly characters in, and maybe
on top of Scooby-Doo, on top of all the other
that's it.
IPs that we've heard.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing to see what happens here. And okay, so but that's for future shows. And speaking of future shows coming up, as we look ahead to March, we've got March 17th. We've got the Phase 1 of Dockside Inn and Suites is opening. That's the half of the rooms for that 2,050 room value resort will open on that date. And when the rest of the rooms for the Dockside Inn and Suite open later this year, that hotel automatically becomes one of the biggest resorts on International Drive. And likewise, we didn't even talk about Peacock Live. Okay, which
it's okay. It's coming. It's coming.
Okay, well that's March 28th, 29th, folks, and I promise the next show we'll do a deeper dive on that. But anyway, Dustin, so while people are waiting for that, they can, of course, enjoy the weekly episodes of We Like Theme Parks. But what else you got going on online?
I'm still over at stepstomagic.com, Universal, Disney trip planning, top 10 lists, lot of cupcakes, as well as I'm over on Instagram, so at Dustin Fuhs, and I'm just having fun. Being over here on the Universal Joint podcast is always a blast, and you're still what I think the 7 or 8 shows that you have is probably not helping your voice.
Well, that's the problem with podcasts is they just don't work as mime. Anyway, speaking of the other shows, we've got Disney Dish with Len Testo. We have Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. We have Looking at Lucasfilm with the amazing Dan Z. We have Marvelous Disney with Aaron Adams, the very talented gentleman who edits a lot of the shows here. And we have I Want That with Michelle Valladolid, which is all about Disney merch. Tell you what, folks, if you could do Dustin and I a favor, if you get over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only the show you're listening to now, but theme parks, that would be helpful. If you really, really, really like what we do here, you could go head over to Bandcamp and subscribe. And Dustin, you mentioned your social media presence. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News.